What's up, guys? This is John from Balcony DAO. We are at the Balcony House here in Miami for Bitcoin Week. We've been hosting events here all week, trying to bring gigabrains around the building here to give us some ideas on where the puck is headed, so to speak. And in our conversations, we met IJ, who we're going to be speaking to today. Today we're going to talk about the very light topic of max extinction, just a whole bunch of dead people on Earth, and outer space, real estate in the outer space, essentially. So IJ, welcome to Balcony Shill. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking us to be here. You know, it's just kind of cool because I imagine one of the things of actually having this great place to interact when there's so many great people coming through Miami this week is to actually have these conversations and interactions. So it's awesome to be a part of this, man.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we want these conversations. What we're trying to do is we want to give you guys the conversations that we're privileged enough to have here, so you can start to understand the ideas that we're playing with. Now, IJ, you run a shop called MAHA SDI, right? And you're basically like the macro of macro investors, right? Long duration, macro concepts that you find ways to make actionable in investments here on Earth and in outer space, as it were. Do you want to elevate us on what that means?
Yeah. So basically, it's one of those things where when it comes to making decisions, right, we want to try to make decisions with the best available information. But then our decisions should also be on what we would call with the best available informations, and then can we progress, can we really look into the future? Step 2, step 3, are there trends to go along with our placements of investments? And like one of the investments, it's not just about dollars, it's like, say if you have a child, right, and you get pay raises, well, maybe you want to, quote unquote, move to a different city so they can benefit from an educational system that's been ranked higher. Mm-hmm. So these are decisions that we make all the time. But for us, we're super blessed to be working with some great organizations. We have exposure, we have access to data that most people may not have, or maybe even want to think that it's actually correlated to investing. And then from that information that we try to glean off where we can advise ourselves, aka our own investments, and others to have the safest, best ROI for a given situation. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, so that conversation with us started with a discussion about migratory patterns, which is something that I'm very interested in. Yeah. I've seen a huge influx of sub-Saharan Africans making their way up into Northern Africa and then across into Italy or Spain. I spent a lot of time in Spain.
Literally that's what triggered it. I'm very, we have relatives, family in a place called Lampedusa, which is 17 miles off the coast of Libya, which is still an Italian island, but they are inundated with quote unquote migratory people, refugees.
Yeah. So in this discussion,
and you're out of Spain, so that's how we discussed it.
That's how we ended up into the conversation. But then you took that really dark turn. We're like, 350 million people minimum are probably going to be dead in the next 18 months. And that's part of my investment thesis, and that really obviously kind of like shook me to my core.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us why you think 350 million people are destined for death imminently, and how that impacts your investment strategy?
Yeah, I mean it's really simple, right? So let's look at Bitcoin mining, right? So we have to look at the cost of how much money can we make at Bitcoin, the present day of Bitcoin, right? Where we're going to get electricity, how much we're going to pay for electricity, and how good are the GPUs or the miners or whatever the equipment. And then we can put that all together and say, okay, we're going to earn, $10,000 a day. Mm-hmm. So all these things we're considering, right? But there's one thing that we do know is that there is a hard and fast value of the chips. There's a hard and fast cost of electricity. And we have to take those into account. So for us, we just look at certain situations and it's just a mathematical problem, mathematical issue, a mathematical situation. We just see right now, for the amount of calories that are being consumed on the normal trend of human beings, right? So if you look at all the calories, all the candy, all the food, all the wheat, all the sugar, all the carbohydrates, everything that input value, we'll just say it's 10 trillion calories.
Okay.
So now we're at the point of an agreement. There's roughly 8 billion people on the world. They eat 10 trillion calories a year. Well, the math says that that the Earth is not going to produce 10 trillion, or even going near that trend over the next 18 to 36 months. So if there's less calories to be had, the rich people or rich organizations can afford to pay higher costs for calories, right? Just like how as Bitcoin migrates higher, it takes more and more resources to actually purchase or acquire Bitcoin. So that being said, we can say, okay, if this many people are here in existence now, and this is the growth rate, this is the death rate, and this is the amount of calories that are being produced, well, what's going to happen? Well, we know that people are going to have less calories, but ultimately, if people have less calories, and there's the calories that are available are going to be expensive, that means the people and organizations that can't afford those calories
Are going to glom them all.
are going to try to get the least costly calories. But if there's not enough calories, well, then it's real simple. Then people go hungry.
People go hungry.
Right.
So
that's, I mean, literally, it's just a math problem.
So how much of like the war in Ukraine and Russia is impacting that thesis?
Well, I mean, like, so this was already a trend going, but it just got accelerated.
Okay.
So this is a true fact, right? Two of the major things, I mean, and this, other people have mentioned these things, so it's not just my data sets. So please look it up, do your own research, right?
DYOR.
So great leaders in this thought space are Peter Zahan out of Colorado and Austin, and then also George Freeman, so a Eurocentric macroeconomist here in the US. And myself, with data sets we have, it's very, very simple. Russia is the third largest producer and exporter of hydrocarbons, right? So, and then typically on a given year, Russia is the #1 exporter of wheat. So two things. One, they're the third highest exporter of hydrocarbons, only trending behind the United States and Saudi Arabia, okay? And number two is that they are the #1 exporter of wheat. So the average, so let's just talk about hydrocarbons. So everything's on gasoline, gas, we're paying more at the pump. Shout out to all my friends in Cali, should have bought that Tesla.
That's a
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
Tesla show.
You know, $10 a gallon, you know, Tesla's gonna sell out, you know. So, but we saw the macro trend. So when we think about hydrocarbons, when we think about oil and natural gas, well, people don't understand that natural gas is the #1 way we produce things such as fertilizers for crops. So now, if you take away the #3 producer, exporter of hydrocarbons, that means there's gonna be less phosphorus and nitrogen being produced for fertilizer.
Right.
So now, if you do not add the fertilizers that a normal place has, it will produce less food. So now we know that we're reducing the amount of calories that are being produced just on the Russian side. Mm-hmm. Now, Russia, with the sanctions, also they're the #1 exporter of wheat, right? So they have tons of grasslands. So now think about this. Now there's less fertilizers, so all around the world, there's gonna be less crops to be produced per acreage or per hectare. And you take in the fact that Russia is not selling, because it's illegal for them, if you look at what the UN sanctions and all their sanctions are, they can't sell to China. They are doing, you know, they are doing things with Turkey. So what does that do? That produces, one, less global crop yield around the world, and two, the #1 producer, exporter of wheat is Russia. You know what #5 is of exporter of wheat and production of wheat? Ukraine. They're actually planting season right now, but it's kind of hard when someone's trying to bomb your ass. So now you're taking the #1 wheat producer in the world, taking that off the market.
Yep.
And the #5 producer in the world, taking off the market. Just look at what's going on in Odessa. The reason why Odessa is so very, very important is that's how the Turkish, that's how Turkey through the Bosphorus allows Ukraine to interact with the world. They can export their wheat and they will bring in other raw materials and products that they need. So that's why Russia is making a really, really hard push. So if you just look at those three things, like one, there's less phosphorus, less nitrogen being exported because of natural gas.
Less supply of wheat.
Less supply of, yeah, and then actually so less production of wheat in the world. To give you an idea, 40% of all calories consumed around the world is actually a grain or a wheat. So if you're taking all these calories off the market, like I said, I'm just using an example, 10 trillion calories, we're probably not going to produce that. It's 100%.
So you mentioned that Arab Spring in many ways was instigated by these types of macro events. And so you see this as also being a geopolitical risk for some of these sort of shaky nations.
Yeah, I mean, the correlation is huge. So to understand, if you guys only look at about 10, 12 years ago, something called Arab Spring, basically where a lot of North Africa, it's called the MENA region, that's Middle East, North African countries, where they had a change of regime. They had riots in the street in Egypt. Right? If you look at, actually, I spent a lot of time in Egypt, they've actually had 2 different government systems come through there. So what happened during the Arab Spring is they actually had a drought in Russia. The drought in Russia, they were only able to produce roughly 75% of the crop they usually.
Right.
So they want to feed their people and sell the rest out.
Yep.
There was a production drop of 25%. Wheat prices, bread prices, non-unleavened breads, right, in Egypt, Libya, Kuwait, in some situations, the cost of bread went up 6-fold.
6-fold.
Yeah. So that was 25% of a reduction out of Russia because they're the number 1 exporter of wheat.
Right.
And they had some droughts. Now you're looking probably an offline of about 85% of Russian wheat. And
So-
that had nothing to do with phosphorus and nitrogen production for fertilizers.
So this is 3x worse than the mitigating factors that you believe were a meaningful part of the Arab Spring.
Yes.
Okay.
So right now, I mean, like, how does it make money? I go, well, everyone's saying, okay, let's buy Bitcoin to go off the US dollar, right? I mean, these are global trends. Well, one thing you could do is you can actually buy wheat contracts. You can actually buy fertilizer contracts. So you have an idea, fertilizer contracts have gone up 11 times since the war started out, roughly. So you could have got 1100x.
Before leverage.
But before, yeah. And typically on leverage, when it comes to commodities, you can go 5, 10, 20, 100x, depending on where, I'm not, where you want to do it. So in some situations, some people have realized, in these cases, 50 and 100x already.
Wild. Were you investing in these contracts early on?
I'm not going to say where our placements are.
Right.
I can just say the things that have happened, people are only starting to understand what the ramifications are 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year and a half and 2 years. We see the incredible effectiveness of the human spirit of really being able to say, hey, we should have a choice of how we want to rule ourselves. We don't want outside influences. That patriotic, fighting for their homeland, and also putting the most sophisticated weapons in their hands. Really, no one, and I'm saying this, and there could be some outliers out there, no one could have thought that this so-called massive superpower when it comes to military could be befuddled by the Ukrainian spirit. So a lot of the estimates are done that Ukraine would fall within 90 days.
Yep.
Kiev would fall within roughly less than 35 or 45 days. This may be a long slog. And if that's the case, there's an incredible opportunity to see what's going on trendly and then act locally.
So essentially, every single day that this war goes on, those contracts become more valuable, those futures.
Right.
Right.
Because if you think about, say the G7, the G20, human calories that we consume, this is an inelastic price. Like, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how much money you are.
You still got to eat.
You
Everybody
still got to
gotta
eat. So the richest countries are typically some of the best producers of that calories, and also they're securing contracts. So the most major places, and this is, I'm not sharing any insider information, this is information that's shared by a lot of things, is you just got to see where the major purchasers of these contracts are. And right now, major purchasers of these available contracts, and this is not just commodities, we're talking about other things. If you see where some of these long-term contracts, long-term options and futures are, they're into hard goods. And then, talking about hard goods.
Bill Gates now has just gone crazy with land. The world is moving towards real-world functional assets to sustain life, essentially, and shelter.
Yeah, so Bill Gates is a beautiful example of people that have resources, they have access to information, they have actions. And why is Bill Gates, who over the last 30 years, has been number 1 or number 2, basically for the last 30 years, how is he the number 1 farmland owner in the US? And that doesn't include him and his group or a group of other investors who share his same data sets, why they've been aggressively acquiring farmland. And typically the United States per square acres, depending on where you're from, say like a Nebraska, say like a Iowa, then you look at a little bit northern, you look at towards Canada, these are the most productive farmlands in the entire world. And then to that, it's not that it's just super fertile, but they have access to cheap railway or river systems.
Yep.
So like not only is
and we're not embargoed. We can send it places.
We can send it places. So like when you think about that, you go, okay, I don't want to invest in contracts. I go, well, maybe you invest in companies that have consumer products here in the United States that are exporting to other countries.
Such as?
Well, I mean, just name some of the major names that if you look at your cupboard, like Kellogg's, right? They buy a lot of wheat, right? So yeah, they're going to buy a lot of wheat because people aren't going to stop eating cereals. So that's a really simple thing. It's like, okay, who's buying? Who's probably getting a better deal? Who's better invested? And you look at some of these companies that are producing calories. And those calories are going to be more and more valuable because there's less and less calories available.
And they have the cost, they're able to actually purchase them wholesale, and they have huge benefits of scale for their organizations.
Right.
And so you're saying put your money where the winners are right now in the grain space.
Yeah, I mean, not just grain space, but really, I mean, all natural resources. All the natural resources that typically come out of that area of the world, it's a real issue. It's a real issue because you're taking all that off the market.
So the kind of link here now is, we're doing a real world based NFT, right? So we're selling actual real property on chain. You're taking this information and you're also studying these migratory patterns, so you kind of know where the puck is going with these migratory patterns. And so you're actually doing real estate investments as a tech guy, right? And you're investing in places where you think these people are going to go in search of food, political stability, and food security. Where are those places? Yeah,
okay, so that's
Does everybody move to Omaha, Nebraska? Is that what happens?
Well, I mean, if you like Dominican Sue and you like Warren Buffett, sure. I mean, I don't know if that carries you through the day. But okay, so let's even dial it back even further. So the reason why globally people are actually leaving rural America, rural China, rural Canada, and why are they going to Toronto? Why are they going to Austin? Why are they going to London? And typically, and this is data set you can do your own research on, is that per hourly input, you will get a 17% benefit by being in a major metropolitan area. So if you're a pediatrician, would you rather make $100,000 as a pediatrician in, say, small-time Indiana, or would you like to make $117,000, and that's compounded over your entire career, and you have access to great restaurants and you have a great access to great school systems. I mean, so know that there's a reason, and this has nothing to do with global trends, but there is a reason that people are leaving the farm, leaving suburbs, and going into the cities, because one, there's an economic advantage, and two, there's community. So investing simply in these major metropolitan areas, I mean, look at Miami. I mean, this is just a small part of it. Why are we all here? It's because we're all here.
Correct.
Why are we at the party? Because, Bitcoin's here, but you thought there's so there's a lot of things to do that. So if you get involved, if you're looking at real estate, I mean, some of the holdings that you guys have, some of the things you advise on, I mean, you're in the greatest metropolitan, you're really the center of the universe, right?
Real estate capital of the world.
Real estate capital of the world. So, I mean.
But there is a prevailing counter argument where people are saying, well, the cost of living in these cities is too great. COVID accelerated a migration out of cities into tertiary markets, into the Sun Belt, into rural areas where people are able to remote work in, and they don't have to be in cities anymore if you're always on a Zoom.
Okay, so that is exactly how we profit.
What do you mean? What do you mean that's how you profit?
When people say these things, and like the reasons why, okay, listen, COVID drove us out. We don't want to be in high rent zones. So now San Francisco's emptying out, right? It's a liberalized state. There's poo-poo on the ground. There's apps because there's so many. So we understand that there's a lot of people living, and they're going to, say, Phoenix, Arizona, Las Vegas, where we're based out of, or maybe they're going to Truckee, or maybe they're going to Reno, right? But that's from the U.S.-centric idea of the stresses. Do you know how many people right now in Hong Kong that would kill that would kill to get a visa to live in San Francisco. For every person that leaves San Francisco because they're thinking from their own personal benefit, there's literally hundreds of thousands of people that would swim to live in the opportunity, to have the opportunity to live in Los Angeles, to live in San Francisco. Every day, people put themselves at risk leaving from neighboring countries just to get to here in Miami, just to say that they were rescued by this, so.
Literally swimming here. Literally swimming here from Cuba. I mean, there's people like who,
Yes.
we have.
Every day.
Every day.
So, so when people say these things, they're typically looking at a personal benefit to them, what they're seeing. Hey, I'm only making $180,000. Boo-hoo for me. I'm paying $9,000 for a studio next to be the Google campus. Okay, I get it. That's one person. Once again, boo-hoo for the guy who earns $180,000.
Right.
But I mean, like, if I'm a gentleman in Jakarta, if I'm a gentleman in Manila, and I'm a businessman, if I have a choice of all the great cities around the world to migrate to, where would I want to go? And the answer is San Francisco or New York. So though those are trends, this is trends of the most, really, when I say this, the most idealized benefits of being in the first world.
It's sort of superficial data, but for your...
So for us, I mean to cut you off, but for us, we knowing that, when those people leave, like when I say this, every person that leaves Manhattan, and then I go back to them 10 years, would you rather have held on to that property, done Airbnb, or would you rather have sold your property, your penthouse in Manhattan, took the cash, and got a place in Miami? And I'm pretty much guaranteed that they're like, we should have Airbnb'd out.
Sure.
I mean, like, so for us in the macro trend, these major cities, though for us, we have the luxury of going to these major metropolitan areas, we don't have to sign papers. We don't have to go through border patrol. There's countries out there that you can't even leave your neighborhoods. Just look at Shanghai today. So when people say these things, it's just beautiful.
Right.
Because that means there's inventory available, and then potentially people like us, groups like us that we advise, they can take actions and invest in these major metropolitan areas.
Buy the dip. Buy the real estate dip. That's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, location. I mean, if New York, as you've proposed, is the center of the universe for real estate, you should have real estate in the center of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that, and I think that's absolutely right. But now to backfill all of that inventory, though, I guess there needs to be some major changes in immigration, right? Like we actually need to accept more people, I think, into this country to backfill, because there are people dying to pay more money to be in those cities. We should let them in.
Yeah, I mean, like even though real estate is finite in certain locations, there's a whole shitload of real estate out there, right? I mean, like, you look at Alaska, no one's there, right? So you can have it, but there's got to be value, there's got to be utility. Mm-hmm. So that being said, there will always be a demand for these places. And then if you look at migratory patterns, right? So literally, we had the opportunity to speak with people on the ground. We've had relationships. We have relationships in Warsaw, Poland. So Warsaw, Poland metropolitan area is 1.5 million people. It's been growing great, really for the last 35 years. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Very expensive city.
Very, very expensive city. Well, now think about this. In the last 26 days, 500,000 migrants have gone into Warsaw. So could you imagine LA and whatever area, and you add a third of LA to it over basically less than a month? So there's so many different things talking about migratory patterns. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Over the next roughly 35 to 70 years, we're going to see these massive levels of migration. And there is opportunity if you know it.
So those migratory patterns are going to inure to the benefit of established U.S. cities, in your view?
Well, first and foremost is like, people just want to get away from danger, right? So one, that's the most important thing, is like, where are people going to migrate from danger? And then if you understand that when it comes to investing, you always want to upgrade your investments, right? Maybe I started out with a 2-unit apartment in fucking Berlin, Connecticut, and now I'm doing 40 units in Hoboken.
Right.
So typically people want to get away from danger. They want to protect their children. They want to give their children the opportunity to go to bed knowing that they're safe and they can have a hot meal the next day. And then if you look at over time, those same people over time would want to go to nicer places, safer places. So one of the things is like, what are those places around the world that will have inexpensive, fairly cheap fresh water, inexpensive, cheap calories? I mean, but first let's get these people out of danger. And then one of those things out of danger is not having water. So one of the things is access to fresh water.
Yeah, so what's fascinating to me about what you're doing is you're looking at investments based off of the largest of macro inputs available. Right. You're just looking at food, water, and if you're going to get murdered, right? If a bomb's going to fall on your head, right? It's basically the three things that you look at when you decide on what piece of real estate deserves your investment.
Yeah, and then I mean, then we go through. So that's the basis of our thesis. But then we do everything that all the other investors do. We go through all the things like, okay, what school system do we want our people in? You know, all these other trends. You know, why did Google build a new campus here? Why did Elon put the mega fact, like put it? So we're looking at all these other things. We're just adding another level of dimension, because typically in our placements, we are buyers. And then with those assets we buy, we hope to generate future profits, but not from selling those assets, but by holding those assets. So these are long-term commitments. And that's, I think that's, a lot of people would say that. I mean, like, you know, when's the best day to plant an apple tree? 20 years ago. Right.
Well, the second best day is today.
Yeah, so let's eat apples, right? So we go through the normal processes. We're not nerds. We're super nerds, right? I mean, like, let's get that way. And then, so all the other things that, you know, barring everything equal, we're working on the same premise that average person has, but we're just adding another dimension. And that's the value we bring, because we've been very, very fortunate seeing these trends. You know, we talked about the trends. In 1999, you know, we were approached about what we thought about the space industry. So I've been in the space industry for whatever, 23, 24 years.
This was one of my favorite parts of the conversation. It's like, oh, you invest in real estate? Yeah. Where? On Earth or in outer space, right?
Yeah,
and so you're doing things in the space,
right?
Which is just fascinating. How the hell did you get into the space?
Well, I mean, so basically for us, it's just deployment of capital and understanding like where we want to spend our time, energy, and effort, right? I mean, like you just like, okay, let's just think about it. So we all, I don't know, I have a dog, some people have dogs out there, and if my dog's hungry all the time, and if he sees 20 people with food at a barbecue, he's gonna go to every person. And wouldn't you know it, he's probably gonna fall in love with the girl that gives him a piece of brisket. Right. So he's gonna find the most productive area and stick with it. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to real estate and also the space industry, we identified early on that the space industry is offering, over the long term, the highest ROI known to human existence. There's no greater industry growth than the exploration and maybe even the colonization or civilization throughout the stars.
You know what that is?
What's that?
That's an intergalactic shill.
Yeah.
That's big time.
Yeah. So but if you look at these trends, right, the richest man is the richest man now at $280 billion for a private company, which is SpaceX. SpaceX is so hard to invest in that people have to invest in Tesla, which is not exposure to SpaceX. And that Tesla stock has gone up so much, the richest man in the space industry, not because he's in the space industry, it's because they circumventally are investing in him.
Right, you're getting tangential access.
Yeah, exactly.
Derivative access.
Yeah, so I mean.
Which is not even derivative access, it's sort of like, it's just kind of like.
No, exactly.
It's at the same party.
I'm in the same city. I'm at the hotel, just not on the right floor. You guys are penthouse. I'm, you know, look at my guys. We're more of, you know, back kitchen, kind of like eating off the, you know, eating off the cart.
So how are you?
Never order the clam chowder.
Never order the clam chowder. Yeah. How are you investing in space specifically?
Okay, yeah, sure. So this is very, very simple, but it's not very romantic when it comes to space. Like literally, we are putting resources into chasing alpha, right? To get a higher rate of return and a lower amount of risk. We want to make more money with risking less than the average person, the average organization. So how we invest in space is like, okay, there's infinite amount of space. Everybody wants to get to space. Everyone wants to build rockets, super sexy, right? Everyone wants to build satellites, we understand that. But for us, since we're real estate guys, we're like, well, how do you get to space like rockets? I go, no. You get to space by having real estate, and you have airports, AKA launch facilities and spaceports. So right now, our major core competency is we do investments, we do structure, we do operations, day of launch, and maintenance of spaceships and spaceports, and we consult in that space around the world. So,
Amazing.
yeah, so people thinking, okay, let's buy the moon. I was like, let's get to the moon.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, you need a rocket. Okay, let's build a rocket company. I was like, no, you don't need a rocket company. You need to get permission from NASA, from the US government, or Russia, or China, or India, or Japan to launch from their facilities, because there's only so many, very few. Right now,
You can't launch out of Russia right now.
you can't, so you're absolutely right. So the #1 launch facility is a place called Baikonur, look it up. That has zero access now for the rest of the world. They also have a launch facility in a place called French Guiana. Russia is doing great stuff in the space industry. They're not letting anybody, so now you're taking those offline. There's literally a line waiting in Cape Canaveral. You miss your flight, you can't go. Think about this, man. You have hundreds of millions of dollar satellites that you can take that data that it's going to collect the weather and sell it to all the best data collectors. We'll sell it to CNN, we'll sell it to Google. Your satellites can literally make you, say, $1 million an hour. Well, just an example. So literally, if you put up your 10,000 satellites, you can make, say, $20 million a day. That's awesome. You built your satellites, you got your rockets. Now you have no place to lift off of because the inventory is taken offline. So we saw this trend. We saw we saw that there would be what we would say turbulence. Not because I'm great, it's because I'm surrounded by really cool people and we have access to data. We thought that access would be limited from those partners, AKA Russia, AKA China. So we're like, how are we going to fit those needs? And now to be quite honest, we're super blessed that we only take on business by referral only. People get interviewed just to be our clients. It's crazy because we're working together. And when people talk about real estate in space, I can tell you right now, one of the probably biggest, coolest things that people can start to understand to invest in is building and investing in space stations.
Let's talk about it. So
Yeah.
space stations, what's it cost? $300 million to build a space station?
I mean, to get it up there,
Okay.
I mean, depending on how much tonnage, you really can't. I mean, it's like talking to a lawyer about divorce. It's like, hey, how am I going to get rid of my husband? You know, he's worth 20 million, I'm worth 20 million. He's like, it's not going to be cheap, right? But no specifics. But let's just start with a $100,000 retainer. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's not cheap. But the reason why we can get involved in these things is because the return on investment is so huge.
So people pay a boatload of money to send satellites to space. That all makes sense.
Yes.
Who's the client? Are you getting government contracts? Are you getting like nation state paper?
Well, okay, so I can say that all participants today that are involved in the space economy are our, or potentially could be our clients.
Right.
So I can say that.
Okay.
But the average is a majority of all dollars, US dollars denoted, comes from nation states. You're absolutely correct. And then secondly, from that, it becomes from subsidized companies, organizations from those nation states.
Right.
And then third is private enterprise and public companies like a SpaceX. A good example is like a Firefly, Axiom. So these are other space companies.
How many space companies are there right now?
I mean, like, so, I mean, it's kind of like how many crappy altcoins are there?
Right.
Right? I mean, it's like literally, let's get a white paper together and get a bunch of guys putting lab coats on. We could raise some money together, because the barrier to entry is so little. But to have actionable and actually return on investment, it has to be quality.
Right.
Right. So when you look at crypto events, anyone can put a crypto paper together. Anyone can do these things. Anyone can be doxxed by a crappy doxing company, right? But to do something really special, and this is, I have no investments. If you look at what, say, Avalanche is doing, if you look at what Chainlink is doing, they are surrounded. Look at Matic and Poly, those guys and girls over there. They've done amazing things and created billions and billions of dollars in opportunity and wealth. And then you look at so many things that are on blockchains that are,
Trash.
Just trash. So I mean, anyone can do it, but can you put the team together? Can you get the resources to execute? And that's what we try to help people out, navigate those waters. If they want to do it themselves or they want us to execute for them.
So, okay, how much more satellite supply is required to drive the demand for the space stations that you're building here on Earth, right? And what is the input that determines that output? Is it just data? Is it how much data do we need?
So, if you look at to understand data, right? So like, because people are trying to understand the word big data, what is data? And it really comes down to math and numbers for us. So if you look at the top 5 country value companies in the world, the top 5, everyone can name 1 or 2 of them, right? One's Google, and what are they? They're a data company. Apple, they're not just a data company. We all have Apple phones. We're creating data. They transmit data, right? So of the 5 richest companies in the world, there's only one that's based on actually not data, and that's actually Aramco, which is the Saudi Arabian oil reserve company. Mm-hmm. Imagine that you owning Saudi Arabia. It's like, okay, I'm a company. So that's why you're one of the most valuable companies in the world. So when it comes to data, if right now, 2022, for the top, and if you look at the top 100 most valuable companies, it'll surprise you. A lot of them involved in data and data transmission and data collection, data dissemination, data understanding, big data. If you understand that group, when people say it's like, well, we need satellites for data, I was like, we're already there. So there's never a time where young people are not going to be enamored by social media in any kind of form for the next 100 years. They're going to be creating data. So it's like, well, how many satellites would we need? I go, well,
how many people?
It's going to be a lot.
Right.
So, and then when you talk about, surrounding the Earth, right now we think there's probably about at least a need to about 500,000, 500,000 satellites that should be up in the next 120 months.
How many do we have right now?
It depends on who you ask. I mean, like some say it's like, we can look at the data. Some say like 3,800. No, it's like 38,000. So it's a factor of but like some are 11,000. Like the numbers are all because some of the data we have on satellites we don't have access to. We know how much stars, right? We know
Why
how
don't we
much.
have access to this data?
What's that?
Why don't we have access to this data?
Because it's secured by national security. China would not want us to know how many satellites they really have that are hovering right over you right now.
Right.
I mean, like you're kind of a big deal, so they probably would know what you're up
huge deal.
to.
They're definitely watching.
Obviously. I mean, Balcony Dow, what's up? Get in on it. So there's some data sets that we don't know, but we do know the trends. But we're not thinking about that. We're thinking about how many satellites do we need around the moon? How many space stations do we need around the moon? How many different quote-unquote assets do we need to sustain a full Martian colony or Martian space stations? And then if you want to look at that, what's after that? I go, well, then there's your Europa, right? There's Io. I mean, it just keeps on going because the opportunity is so great, right?
So you're adamant or very clear that we will be an interplanetary species at some point soon. Is that
yeah,
fair?
I mean, there's a definitely high likelihood.
Right.
There's a high likelihood because it's literally, it's just what we do, right?
But even if you're wrong, right, there's still an enormous demand for stations here on Earth to figure out that we're wrong. And so your investment thesis doesn't change in the near term, whether or not we get to Mars or not.
No, I mean, like, it's one of those things, right? It's one of those things. People were really dragged kicking and screaming in the streets because some guy put together some paper, some metal, and some ink, and now it's a printing press, and it's an invention by the devil. Really, the Earth is flat? I mean, where are all the flat earthers now? Like, because we got COVID, we got war. Shut up. So no matter what you think or what you do, just because you talk, I'm happy for you. But this is an inevitability, and if it doesn't go to that, that means that the human race is extinct. I mean, that's what the gamble is. If you look at all data, like like how many people have insurance there, and to be quite frank, if you have insurance on your body, we like to think that we're all going like land lugeing, right? We're jumping out of planes, but we're not. Most people are boring. So why do they need insurance? Well, just in case this happens.
Yep.
So when it comes to space exploration, if you look at some investors and some organizations, they are heavily into weapon systems. Why? Because they know that humans want to defend themselves and that humans are by nature
risk averse.
So all these organizations, the bottom line is we should have an insurance package. Now, am I investing in those insurance packages? No, but other organizations are, and that means basically to protect the DNA code of the human race. So these macro trends of us, I was like, do you want to breathe?
Right, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you're a big fan of breathing. Okay,
Yep.
let's do that. Well, then if you're a big fan of breathing, I think that other people who have children want their children to breathe.
Likely.
I can't rely on other nation states to stop using hydrocarbons because coal is cheaper than any other forms of energy production on the long run if they have access to basically river transportation. So I can't blame those countries. I can't blame those people. But if I have no way of stopping those people, giving them access to freer, cleaner, cheaper energy, it would be foolhardy of us to then think that they then in the near future will stop producing that level of hydrocarbons
to sustain themselves.
To sustain the entire planet.
Yep.
I mean, like, so this is inarguable. But I mean, that's the part is if I say that, then we can argue.
Correct.
But I mean, the data is clear. I mean, like, all the things being equal, it's a, but this is what humans do. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where but it's very, very hard for organizations, especially governments, let alone individuals, because the individual, you know, for the single mother out there, right? She has 2 children. She can't think of these things, let alone set up a ledger wallet, right? So we have those abilities. We should then be mindful of those people who don't have the opportunity to that have this insight or this extra information. We should build them on-ramps to be able to use wallets easier. We should give them opportunities to divest their portfolios of investment, great or small, into other opportunities of real estate that we have shown stands the test of time when it comes to inflation or deflation. So I mean, like, these are all different things, but when we understand that, most people in investing are at this level. We're just we're at a different time and space of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, part of our thesis is that eventually governments are going to realize that if they're too stringent on regulations for what we're doing at Balcony DAO, we remove the possibility of on-ramping people into the greatest asset class, literally what the earth is real estate.
Right.
We preclude them from investing in that, and then they're left with online betting and lotto, which is not really a good substitute for good, strong, hard assets.
Yeah.
You know.
So I mean, so this is, I mean, this, like, one of the biggest scams in the world is arbitrage of currencies, forex currencies. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the data sets of who actually owns currency trading facilities, 3, 30, 40, 50, 100x, a lot of them are crypto companies.
Yep.
And so that's the reason why people are looking to chase alpha, but it's super high risk, and real estate is not.
Yeah, I mean we're chasing cash flow and some beta. You know, that's our game.
But I mean, it's denoted in the U.S. dollar, which has been a store of wealth for basically forever, since, you know, really since
the modern economy.
Yeah, since the modern economy. Yeah, I mean, like, look at the economy of the U.S. in the war after the War of 1812. And you look at 1813, it's a no-brainer.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that are going on. It's like, does this investment, does this deserve your time and attention? I know a lot of people that put a lot of time and attention, right, into Netflix during COVID. So it seems like maybe you should buy some stock in, right?
It's an interesting thesis.
Right? I mean, what are people doing? Like, I mean, if we take a sample set of how many people, either it's a Google-based phone or an Apple-based phone. So let's maybe buy Apple and Google. This is not hard stuff. I'm not buying Huawei because we don't have Huawei phones here.
Correct.
So, I mean, like, people can see it, but then everybody wants to say, okay, listen, you can work from home, right? You can make money while you sleep, right? This is, you know, passive income. They're saying all the things, but when it comes down to it, it's what real hard assets giving value to people. And there's something to say of value for a person that, hey, listen, I want a safe, dry place to bed down and sleep and my kids to grow up. So when you invest in, like, residential in US, when you invest in leasing locations in Mexico or Canada, it's pretty darn solid. And if you guys are helping to facilitate that for other people, not just people in Mexico, United States, and Canada, but everyone around the world, they can get involved in US-based assets. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, like, it seems like it's a no-brainer.
To us, it's a no-brainer. To us,
so now what you do, just put an ape or a dog face there and you're off to the races, right?
It's actually what we're doing. We're actually giving you exposure to the U.S. asset, but then we put the JPEG on top of it, right?
Beautiful. Yeah.
The thesis is like we know what the real estate is worth because we're real estate professionals, right? And it has some kind of a hard floor. At some point, you bump up against replacement value of an asset, and you're just like, all right, it's got to be worth at least that, right?
Yeah.
But what we don't know is if you add an ape on top of that, now what is that hybrid asset worth, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting for us. We're going to see what we don't know the answer, by the way, which is most of the fun.
Start with 10 ETH.
Start with 10 ETH.
Start with 10 ETH. See what happens.
See what happens.
If no one buys for it, say there's only 5 minutes left. Right?
That's it. Right. That's it. So we'll figure out what that looks like going forward. But if you had to tell our viewers, like, where do you put your money right now? You're watching the show, and you can't actually. So this is obviously not investment advice.
Right.
But if you were you, and you are,
right,
where would you be putting your money right now?
So,
other than Balcony DAO.
No, I mean, I've never met a finer organization than Balcony DAO for my. No. It's phenomenal. Thank you for having us. But when it comes to investing, there's a lot of like, okay, invest in gold, invest in silver. There's all the explanations. But for us, this sounds super nerdy. It's where do you get the most value? My parents, God bless them, they thought the value of their U.S. dollars when they earned it was to put it into educational for me and my brothers and sisters.
Seems like it worked out.
No, I'm super, super blessed, right? So when it comes to investing, where do you get the most value? If you're having a super stressful day, right? If you're having and you had to go back to work at the office, maybe spending that $32 with your son or your boyfriend to go see the more Batman, that gives you more value. It puts you at ease. Because if we know you're at ease and you know you're happy, guess what? You live longer. When you have less stress, you can make decisions not based on quote unquote what's going on in the moment, but maybe what's best for not just yourself, but for the people around you. So when it comes to that, one thing is like, where do you think you're getting the most value? And then two, how do you make money while you sleep? Like I really want you to understand that. And if you're able to make even just $10 making money while you sleep, maybe it's investing in vending machines, right? Like literally, because I can understand, it's not high tech.
Yep.
I buy a metal box, I put candy in it, there's a fat kid around who likes candy, I will put quarters in that machine. So when it comes to investing, right, like how do you make money while you sleep? And that's why, and then when you understand that, what choices do you make? Do you get into multi-level marketing where, I mean, essential oils does something, makes people rich, I guess? Or maybe do you want to put it into maybe a DeFi protocol? But if it takes you 2-3 hours and you have to listen to like guys like this and me to explain what DeFi is, I mean, maybe you don't want that. So one of the things is to really understand if you're able to make $10 by not going into work. That's you invest in real estate, passive income, invested in dividend paying stocks, or maybe if you have a risk, maybe even putting in some of these DeFi protocols on stable coins. I mean, that's where it comes out to, because what ultimately happens is that once you earn money while you sleep, so I have several business partners, if I feel like going to the beach one day and they're working, I'm still making a little bit of money, and if they want to go to the, if they want to go to the beach and I'm working, they're still making a lot of money, then there's actually a change in the structure of your brain, because now you know it's a reality. So if you're able to make $10, well, sure as heck, if you make $10, you can make $20.
Yep.
And if $20, we get a few
Yep.
friends that do it, we all can make $1,000 passive a day.
Yep.
And if it sounds too hard to believe, just start with the $10. So when it comes to investing right now, it's about taking just some sort of action. But then taking that action is like, if this guy, like my friend here, he studies over charts day in, day out, he makes a lot of money. But the average person doesn't have the opportunity to work hours and hours in front of the computer.
Yep.
So if you put in a little bit of time and effort, you can't expect that huge of a return, right? So, but if you put a lot of time and effort in and a little bit of money, well, then it's possible. Right. So that's, for right now, but it seems the global trend right now, super, super safe. Over the long term, it looks like since the availability of Bitcoin is fairly scarce, it seems like small investments over time, dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, seems like a very, very strong opportunity. Another opportunity we think is buying long on the US dollar. What I mean by that is like you can open up for exchange, and some of these places that we mentioned that are gonna have these conflicts, their currency is worth less. People want to go to quality. So maybe sell certain currencies. I'll just say a ubiquitous one, sell Argentinian. It literally takes just 10 minutes. Sell the Argentinian pesos and just hold on to US dollars. And that's been paying 38% a year for the last 3-4 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. And these are super safe because you're betting on the US dollar.
So you think the US dollar is a better bet than, say, all these altcoins and shitcoins that people are aping into?
Well, no, I mean, it's just your risk tolerance.
Right.
So I mean, like, there's always ways of making more money and there's always ways of losing money. When it comes to certain aspects, and we can break it down just like all analysts do, but on the global trend, if that currency, I mean, is not backed by assets, right? The US dollar is backed by assets, right?
Is it? I mean, the whole Bitcoin argument is that it's fiat and it's not backed by assets. So what you're saying is quasi-controversial.
No, well, that's fine. I mean, everyone. I mean, that's absolutely fine. What people don't understand when it comes to macroeconomics, like, people talk about the inflation in the U.S. dollar, right? So what's that comparably to? Like, what are you comparing the inflation rate to the U.S. dollar to?
Not Argentina.
Right, not Argentina. So, so when people say that, it's because the government is spending more money on services and debt, and that's why the U.S. dollar is worth less. But that is absolutely not the truth. The absolute truth is, over the last 50 years, going back to Nixon and going back to World War I and World War II and also the birth control pill, if you look at the amount of people that are working now comparably to any point over the last, since the War of 1812, if you look at that, there's more people working. So that means the supply of workers has gone up. So if the supply of workers has gone up, that means we can pay those workers less because there's more workers. Now, we doubled basically the world's populations of workers because women are allowed to work because of World War II. So that's one thing, we've doubled that. So that means the US dollar would have cut in half. And you look at all currencies, that's exactly what has happened. And then you add the two biggest populations into the modern world, one being China, one being India. What do we do with another 900 billion workers? What do we do for the workers that are working in Vietnam and in the Philippines? So we have this giant influx of people that will work for less money. So that's the reason why the buying power comparably. But if you look at the buying power of US dollars in those countries that I mentioned,
right,
it's even stronger.
Right.
So the idea, it's not about the US dollar versus Bitcoin, it's just you have to compare it to certain things. So when people talk about inflation, stuff like that, though they may sound like they know what they're talking about, and though they may have a lot of data sets, that is wrong.
Right.
Like, no matter what science you can share me, and if I could see a dragon pulling the moon every night, I'm actually going to say it's probably a gravitational, mechanics than it is a dragon pulling the moon across this. I mean, there's a lot of cool things out there, but the one thing to know is the most important thing about investing is just invest.
Yep.
And the number one to get the highest ROI in that is to invest in yourself or invest in your children. I mean, there's nothing more patriotic and most of those planetary than investing in yourself and investing in your children. There's the terrible conflict, this war in Ukraine. But if you look at the trends, this has never been more of a peaceful time in the history of humanity. And what has happened? If you act like a knucklehead, like the Russian organization is, that really, now you're being ostracized.
Yep.
People are like, what's sanctions doing? I go, give it time. We'll see where Russia.
You sound like Joe.
What's that?
You sound like Joe.
Well, I mean, like, Joe has access to a lot of information. Joe, we're talking about President Biden, the President of the United States, by the way. He said outwardly in public before the invasion, said that the invasion was coming through. So how did he know that? And one of the major reasons how we knew that is because of space assets that we help with. It's data collection, data dissemination, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, like, so to give you an idea how important it is, information and data, it's all going to the stars. And if you have the opportunity to get involved in the space industry, like in the next 12, 15 years, space will be just like BTC week, but it'll be crazier because we'll be even richer than any of these Bitcoin clowns are. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got billions, we got trillions. I mean, that's where it's at.
I want to get into space. I want to play with some space. I like the space. I'd like to play there.
Like this is like when we're having a conference. Like I was in DC just a week ago. There's the Space Symposium. All my friends out in Colorado Springs and Colorado. Like there's like 50, 100, 500 people. But like when start people understanding like the average person can make an incredible above average rate of return higher than crypto.
Wild.
Right now.
How can people access those returns today? Can they invest with you?
I mean, they can. We're open to talk to different organizations and individuals.
Right.
We don't really get
it's basically like LPs. You basically bring these people in as LPs into these?
Yes, absolutely. So, remember, we're talking limited partners and depending on what jurisdiction. So you're absolutely right. Here in the United States, typically you have to have a certain net worth. These are called accredited investors.
Oh, we know it well.
Well, when it comes to limited partnerships and group partnerships, it depends on that group.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so this is, and here's the thing, it's like the opportunity is so great in crypto. So let's not take it away. But okay, but where is crypto 5 years from now? You're not going to achieve these high rates of return. Space, I mean, we're invested for the 300-year, in the 300-year range, right?
Yeah, 300 years is about the right. That's about the right duration, I guess.
Yeah, right.
That's about right.
I mean, I imagine you doing these same things, just a bucket and some water, and you just spitting your propaganda, right? Asking questions. I can see that. We can do that, right?
Yeah, man. I
just feed you every once in a while with some, fish
yeah,
flakes.
I mean, if you just keep my brain alive long enough. That's my goal. My goal is to live long enough
to pickled brain?
To get a pickled brain to see what the hell happens. I just want to see how this thing turns out. I mean, it's fascinating to watch all this technology unfold. The other day there was this guy on Twitter and he was tweeting out. He's like, "What are these, like spaceships?" And it was the satellites, getting launched up.
Yeah.
Right. We're not even used to seeing these things. It's like breaking our brains.
Right.
Like we're sort of like intellectually aware of the fact that we're now exploring space. We're now building space infrastructure. We know it's happening, but when you see it. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, okay, so I'll give you the great example. So basically Web 3.0 is money without banks, it's unbanked, it's all that stuff. But let's dial it back, right? So when I want to give you something, a product or service, and you want to pay me a product or service, we're doing it via our phones, via our wallets, maybe MetaMask, things like that.
Right.
Okay, so that's
up, down.
Boom. So people like, it's a new, I go, you don't have nothing without us.
Right, you are the infrastructure.
And the opportunities to invest in the infrastructure and in the processes is higher than what you can make in crypto right now. There'll be, I mean, like, to say that, what kind of time frame, will Bitcoin hit to 1 million? It's like when?
Right.
But I mean, if it's gonna take us 15 years, would I have taken something better with my $1 million and I get 23 times it in 15 years, or I could have invested in this property, gotten tax benefits and net income every month. Maybe I could have done that.
Yep.
But if I just want to do $1 million and I don't have to worry about the $1 million, we'll put it in the space. Maybe I'll make, instead of 22 million, make 400 million.
So to put a button on it, IJ is telling you space is the place and you got to feed the human race.
That's it.
And that's your whole jam.
That's it.
Super simple stuff.
Yeah.
And it's about
people like cake.
People like cake.
I mean, like if you can't afford cake, if you can't afford tortillas, I mean, like we got problems.
Yep.
I mean, could you imagine we showed up here 9 months from now and I had paid $82 for a Cuban sandwich? It'd be riots.
There would be riots.
That's how
the Cubans would all be paddling back.
Oh my God, they'd be like, hey, listen, it's not that bad. Yeah, no, so I mean, like that's what's happening when it comes to foodstuffs around the world. Now think about this. Is Poland a rich country? Well, I don't know, comparatively to what? But all of a sudden, they just increased their population by 40, in Warsaw, by 33% in less than 28 days. This is the largest migration. Right now, we have about 3.7 million people are displaced. It has a potentiality of another 12 million people. It's never happened before. And all the data sets are being collected by satellites. We're trying to understand it and how to deal with it. And now you put that there's less food to be had because the people that have the food are the ones who are fighting. Like that's kind of, I mean, like.
No, it's wild. I mean, when you laid out your thesis, it revolted me. I mean, I was just like nauseated.
No, because you tweeted that like 300 million, and I mean, like I'm very, very comfortable, and a lot of other people, and that's in the like quote unquote the best case scenario.
Best case scenario is 350 million people die in 18 months.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's staggering. It's disgusting. It's revolting. It's painful to process.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, because if you look at it, there's only so many countries out there that produce enough food to sell. And there's only so many countries out there that produce food to break even. That means we have enough pizza to serve this house, but we can't serve pizza to everybody.
Yeah,
Right?
I'd like to just point out the irony that you're talking about 350 million people dying over the next 18 months of food insecurity, and you're bitching to me about our craft services spread for my YouTube show.
No, I'm just saying, like, I like foie gras, but not day old foie gras. I mean,
my God,
it's
brutal.
It's like
brutal. Let me tell you something. The people who are experiencing food insecurity will take day old.
no,
foie gras happily. Happily.
No, I mean, if this is a ceviche you serve guests, I mean, I guess that's what I'll have to have, right?
Jesus.
No.
Okay, I'll take you to dinner.
No.
IJ.
No. Just buy a lot of bread for me. Buy about 40 metric tons of wheat, and we're cool. Like, I'll kick it with you, Damien. Be cool. Big shout out to this guy. How you find such quality coworkers to deal with this? I mean, quite frankly, circus is a testament to your HR department.
Yeah, you know, we know how to hire clowns, man. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that.
But like, so it's just fun. And like, if I'm wrong, cool, no one died. If I'm right, possibly. And here's the thing, I don't even have to be right because we're invested in such futures and commodities. If it's just a little bit of stresses, we still may achieve 100, 200, 500, 10,000% return.
Yeah, I mean, 10,000% returns is, I would say, optimal. I would say that people
is
like
that's your wheelhouse of return on expense?
Yeah, we'll take 10K X returns. However,
right.
It does feel exceedingly shitty to take a 10K X return on the backs of dead humans.
Well, I mean, you can
not that it's your fault. Like, I'm not blaming you for it.
No,
I mean,
no.
You know, we're privileged. We live in the rich world. We have
No,
things
I'm sorry.
like food.
I'm sorry. You live in a hydrocarbon-free world where those sneakers never produce hydrocarbons that are cutting down rainforests. But no, that has nothing to do with what I'm saying about.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, so you can take that grain, and I'm going to say this, and this is, you know, whatever. You can bleep this off camera if you want to turn it off. Is that
We'll keep it on.
We do have a percentage of our assets that we allocate for altruistic purposes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know anybody in this space, in this like weird crypto space, who isn't making meaningful investments into real technologies that are helping people in the world. For some reason, that kind of gets glanced over. You just get the pictures of the Lamborghinis and like the blue hair and all the bullshit.
Right.
But actually, I find people in this space to be incredibly well-meaning, incredibly thoughtful, but they're also incredibly objective. I think it's like a prerequisite to be in crypto is you have to have a real objective lens and understand like this is actually what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing, right? Most people do not have the opportunity. Most people don't have access to the resources and relationships that some organizations and individuals have. So
that's why we have the show.
Yeah, no, you're doing the community a great service to hear at least different ideas. But really, when it comes down to it, it's about where you're comfortable at and what kind of lifestyle would you want for yourselves and your families over the X amount of time period. And it looks like certain things that people use each and every day, such as the internet, would probably be good investments. Some things that people use, right, like gasoline and oil, though, yeah, it may have destructive purposes over the long run, but it does get millions and millions of people to work. It delivers trillions tons of foodstuffs to people. So these things, it seems like everybody, it's kind of funny, everybody knew that once Google made the announcement that they were the #1 search, right, engine in the world. And if you look about who they competed against in those early days with Sergey and Larry, they were the heaviest hitters in the world.
Yep.
Their stock actually went down. Like, they became the number, and now look at Google. They're one of the largest corporations. But there's no person who's like, Google, that's a shitty trend.
Yep.
Like, Bitcoin, that's a shitty trend. I was like, okay. So like, for me to start talking about space and why countries want to give their people fresh water, maybe they're not ready to hear it.
Yep.
But maybe in 15, 20 years, when they're paying, you know, $32 for a Dasani,
right,
like, maybe they should have, you know, opened a water plant.
I mean, that's a lot of the investment thesis for Balcony DAO, right?
Right.
It's like we saw Web 1 explode. We're old enough to have seen it, right? And one of the largest beneficiaries of the internet was Amazon, right?
Yes.
So real world company that happen to leverage this technology to become one of the largest companies in the world. Likewise, we're looking what's happening in the blockchain and we're saying, okay, this technology is going to explode, and who's going to be the net beneficiary of all that technology?
Yeah.
Real world assets, principally real estate, right?
It would seem that. It would seem that because there's so much locked in value when it comes to real estate. Real estate is not a liquid product, and that's what we're trying to do is liquidity, right?
That's our whole
But
thing.
okay, so let's just, because you mentioned Jeff Bezos, right? So at the time,
Another JB, not John Belitsky,
yeah,
another JB.
JB, yeah, no, it's fantastic company to have. It's
Yep.
a very exclusive club. Lot of parallels I can see.
We have the same haircut.
Yeah. So you mentioned Amazon and the beneficiaries of the internet, right? Well, one of the things that made Amazon Amazon is they made a very large, and this is very public, placement in cloud computing services. Cloud computing services then became what it is today, and it's actually one of the number one drivers of Amazon stock.
Yep.
So Jeff Bezos understood the growth of the internet. Jeff Bezos understood the power of cloud computing and the cost of it. And where did Jeff Bezos just step down as? And now he's taking a more active role in his company Blue Origin in space. So I'm not the smartest one, but I'm thinking if I can follow this guy Elon and Jeff Bezos, maybe I can carry their luggage or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing the same thing. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's important to just distill these ideas down to incredibly simple frameworks and make binaries out of them. And the frameworks that you're operating on, they excite me because they're very well thought out, but they're very, very, very simple theses.
Yeah.
Like, you're not banking on who the L1 winner is going to be in the L1 wars. It's like totally immaterial. You're saying all of these guys are going to need data, and that's what we'll provide, right? And you're going to provide the space launch pads to make sure our species doesn't go extinct. And you're going to bet on
so we get the birds in the air, yeah.
So I appreciate the thesis. I loved the conversation that we had here, and I appreciate you coming on the show, sharing that with our viewers. Hopefully you guys got a little glimpse into some of the frameworks that are being employed to make 10,000x potential returns, which is a lot of X. And so, IJ, I appreciate you being on here. On our show, we let people shill their way off.
Oh,
so if you
yeah?
want to shill your project right now, there you go.
Okay, yeah, no, so if you want to find out more information, I mean, really, there's so much great data out there. I want to make a reference to two gentlemen who are doing extremely amazing, impactful work, sharing their insight. One is a gentleman named Peter Zahan, he's out of Colorado, and George Friedman. You can look them up on YouTube. I mean, they're doing some amazing, amazing stuff. And as for us, we do have an organization, it's called MAHA SDI, that's Maha Spaceport Development Incorporated. We did look at ROI, so we do have an NFT software development company. We actually make games, and we consult for major brands around the world, and we can't say the brands, of course. But if you want to check us out, we're at NFTStudios.online. If you think you want to join and you have some great ideas, hit us up, contact us, and that's NFTStudios.online, and we'd be more than happy to have conversations with you guys, figure this stuff out.
Love it. That was an astronaut shill. That's the first ever astronaut shill. Guys, thank you for joining us today on Balcony and Shill. Thank you to IJ. We'll be back with some more here from Miami. Till next time.